Halloween, everyone. In today's video, I'm going to show you a painted version of the Sanderson sisters for Hocus Pocus. This is actually the Hocus Pocus 2 poster that I've seen a lot of different places, or at least based off of that poster that I have seen. Really pretty purple to blue background, and then it's got the three portraits across the front. I absolutely love it. I hope you guys like it as much as I do. If you are a Hocus Pocus fan, I do have a second Hocus Pocus video from this year, and I'll put a link to it in the description box below, and I'll see you next time. Bye! So we're going to begin by creating that beautiful ombre across all the nails, and I'm going to show it to you on the thumbnail because it's got all the colors in one nail, but on the other nails I kind of went across them in a more faded version. So I'm going to paint teal, blue, and purple, blend it out with a sponge, do a second coat, blend it with your sponge again, and then apply a layer of gel top coat. The gel top coat is because I'm going to be using white ink to create that kind of cloudy, misty looking background. So after that's been cured, apply your white art ink over the top, and then using a clear ink, just kind of blend it out. You don't want it to have any sharp lines. You want to look very, very smoky in the background. After you have that done, if you want to, you can apply another layer of top coat. If you don't apply top coat, you will not be able to erase any misplaced gel. So one thing with gel is that it's nice that you can just swipe it off and redo it. However, if you do that with this, you're also going to be removing that ink. So if you have, where you like to use that kind of I can erase something I don't want method with the gel, then you will want to make sure that you top coat over the ink so that it does not get lost. But if not, otherwise you can go ahead. I'm going to start with Winifred. And I painted her face with the color Cream Donut from the Boston Tea Party Madame Glam collection that was out for October. And I do want to say that I'm using 3 colors from that collection. Cream Donut, which is what I used for all of their skin tones. Braveheart and Boston is Calling. So when you're grabbing these colors, the color Boston is Calling is my darkest shade that I did for some like outlining details and a little bit of like extra color in Sarah's hair. But the color Braveheart, which is what I'm using currently, is probably the best shading color for pale skin tones that I have in my collection. It is a gray tone brown, so it's definitely still a brown, but it's a medium brown that just pushes gray, and that is what you want when you're shading. It's the same thing when you're using makeup and you're contouring. You don't want to have a really rich cinnamon brown to contour with. You want to have a gray tone. Now, depending on how gray you go is, personal preference, but when you're doing the shading, you want to have a color that is a muted tone of brown, so a gray tone brown, because when you have a shadow, that's what it is. The light isn't making the lack of light, the shadow on your face isn't making that area of skin more pigmented. It's not making it darker brown, it's making it less bright. And if you have something that is less bright, there's less white. Less white means more black. Anywho, you want it to be gray tone. So think of mixing a little bit of black into your light colors, which you can do as well. But if you don't want to, this color, Braveheart, is the perfect one to do that shading with. And then after I did my first layer of shading, very dramatic shading on them, which I absolutely love, it's gorgeous. Then I'm going to mix a little bit of black into the Braveheart to further darken it to add even more of that shading. I also want to say that, like I just said, very dramatic shading on all of their faces. Look at some photos, see the shapes, and sometimes when you're seeing shapes of something that's very shaded, that's got dramatic point light shading, it'll almost look wrong. When you go to try to replicate it, especially in the beginning, you'll be like, wow, that looks very strange. Like, especially on her, underneath her cheeks, it looks too dramatic. It looks too sharp, but keep working on it. Keep adding your colors, keep blending it out if you want to. If you want to add another gradation of shading that is lighter than just Braveheart on its own, mix it with Cream Donut, which was the first color. I'm going to take a very bright shade of pink, which is Pajama Party from Madame Glam, and I'm going to be adding the color to her cheeks. Winifred's cheeks are by far the pinkest, so use the straight color there. I'm going to blend it out with more of the Cream Donut, but then if you want to use that kind of a color on Sarah and Mary, I would mix it with Cream Donut so that it's a little bit more subdued of a pink. Fill in their eyes, or her eyes, with the white gel paint. When you're adding all of these little details, I used a mix of white and black gel paint for the precision details, and then mostly gel polish. I've said this in past videos, when you are painting something and you want it to have a soft look, that would be something like skin and hair, usually, for at least the majority of it, where you don't want it to have the brush strokes visible at the end. You want to have it kind of blend together. Use gel polish because it's made to settle down. It's made that the brush strokes kind of dissolve. And when you have a bunch of different colors and you're blending them together, that's going to give you the most smooth results. But if you want precise lines that are sharp, crisp edges, then you're going to want to use gel paint. And as far as painting goes and for portrait work, among anything else, Madam Glam's colors are just so nice to work with, both for their gel paint and for their gel polish. Their gel paint is by far the best I've ever used. It has the thinnest consistency. I find a lot of gel paints to be too sticky and that I cannot get thin little lines with them because they just seem like they tug at the nail. Whereas Madam Glams are not. They're just gorgeous to work with. If you have not tried them and you like doing this kind of artwork or any kind of nail art and it seems like something you would want to try, I highly recommend giving them a try. They have both a regular collection that's your standard colors, and then they also have a neon collection. So that little thing over with, I've said this in so many videos, I cannot get enough of their gel paints. They are just phenomenal. I'm going to continue adding details to my Winifred. I'm going to add a dark, nice, rich color on her lips, which is from Madam Glam, but I believe it is a discontinued color. All of the color names I use throughout this video will be in the description box below. They are all from Madam Glam, so if there's any that you like, definitely see if they're available, but some of my colors have been discontinued, and I believe the red I used on her lips is one of them. It's LA Style, which is so beautiful, but I don't know if it's available anymore. Around her on her cloak, add some darker green. Make sure you really darken it right on that side of her face where it had the darkest shadowing on it, because that also would be an area that would not be hit by the light. Again, if you look at your reference photo, that would be something that you would want to look for. Look at where everything is the darkest and try to pick out those areas. I'm going to add that shading on the other side of her cloak as well. I will fill in the middle of her dress in a moment. I'm just for the time being, I'm going to leave that open. Then with blue gel paint, I'm going to be adding just that little triangle of fabric that is visible across her front. After you have that little bit done, I'm going to take and highlight the green of her cloak. So I'm going to take the same green I've been using all along, and I'm going to mix in just a touch of white gel paint. Then using the color Boston is Calling, I'm going to be adding some little squiggles within her hair. So I use that color for both Sarah and Winifred's hair to add the shading, which, one of them is blonde and one of them is a redhead, so you'd think it wouldn't work, but because of the color it is, and it kind of picks up the tones from around it, it does work. And so I'm going to add just that little bit, kind of feather it out. Make sure that you give little squiggles to the movements of your lines so that it doesn't look so, smooth. She's got curls, so you want to make sure that all the lines you paint have a swiggle to them. Then the original color that I used for her hair, I'm going to mix that with some white gel paint. Again, all the color names are in the description box below, but just use that to add the highlight and make sure those ones are definitely very, very wiggly. Very wiggly, very curly. Add a few curls kind of coming down the sides a little bit if you want to around her face. Some of them may have escaped their updo. I'm going to add a little bit of shading on her dress again. A little bit here and there, a little bit more shading just right kind of along the bottom of her cloak, a little bit more darkness anywhere I need it, and her necklace. The last thing I'm going to do just for her overall look is I'm going to add a highlight around the outside. Not only is she lit directly from a space above her, but there's also some backlighting. So behind her cloak, there's going to be a little bit of a bright highlight. And then a little bit of that white directly on her face to really pinpoint some of those areas I want to put a focus on. And then with gold gel paint, I'm going to be adding the lacing on her dress. The next one we're going to be doing is we're going to be painting Sarah. So I'm going to be having just the same thing. I'm going to use the color Cream Donut to start out her face. And then I'm going to use a really pretty purple to add the top of her dress. And then using a color that is slightly more yellow toned than her skin, I'm going to be adding her hair. One thing that I always notice with myself when I'm adding hair is I don't give it enough space above the head. I have this tendency to make like the part area to be very shallow. If that is the same thing for you, make sure that you just do a little bit of a comparison to make sure that you do allow enough space for her hair above her head. Then going back through, I'm going to use the color Braveheart just like I did on Winifred, add the shading on her face. Her shading is a lot more intense looking. It's more dark, it's more intense. That's the word I'm looking for. It's more intense. So as you are adding the shading on her face, as you can see under her neck, it's a lot bigger block of space that has the shadow, and then on her face it's a little bit more symmetrical where the shading is, just the way that the light is hitting her face. So as you are adding the shading, make sure that you kind of follow through with that and just give her that more intense look on her face. She also has a much darker eye makeup style, and just all in all, she just looks a little bit more intense. I'm going to add her mouth with the same color. I'm actually using Braveheart to do her mouth to start with, and I feel like that gives you a good base, because if for some reason, you know, your lips get in the wrong place, it's easier to correct a flesh tone color than it would be if you went straight to red. I'm going to darken up the Braveheart with some of that black gel paint, and I'm going to be adding the more intense areas of her face, of her shading, especially right below her eyes and around her eyes. Like I said, much more dramatic eye makeup on her, so you want to push that with your painting. There's very little brightness around her eye at all, just a little bit right underneath her brow bone. She's got winged eyeliner, so paint all of that. This is something I've mentioned in a couple different videos. If you have never felt comfortable painting faces, especially with any realism, if that's just something that you've never felt comfortable with, for one thing, I totally get it, okay? I completely understand. I too am not very comfortable, or wasn't very comfortable painting faces. It was something that was just very daunting to me. And I pushed myself and I made myself do it, which is something that I can't recommend enough, is just whenever you've got something like that you don't want to do for whatever reason, art related. I mean, not anything. Don't do something that you're not comfortable with normally, but for art, if there is something that is outside your comfort zone, make yourself do it, because it will eventually get better. It'll be uncomfortable, it'll be frustrating, and it'll be all of those things to begin with, but it'll get more comfortable. And on top of all that, if it's facial painting that is especially difficult for you, look at some makeup videos. Watch some contouring videos for makeup, because the tips they give you for that apply to facial painting and portrait painting incredibly well. It'll give you tips on where to apply highlights, where to apply contour, or in the terms of art, and where you're going to apply your shading. It'll give you clues on facial proportions, because there are videos on, not that I ever condone this, but how to fix your facial proportions, and it'll give you ideas of, you know, where your eyebrows line up with the corner of your eye and where they go to the side of your face. And then you can apply that to your portrait, and it'll kind of give you a clue of what to look for when you're comparing. I want to paint this person or this photo. How do I look at their eyebrows to know where they set so that it looks right on the face? So watch makeup videos. And if you are somebody that does not like makeup, I apologize if that is something that sounds absolutely terrible to you. Just do little bits and kind of inch your way into it if you just like, oh, I can't possibly watch a makeup video. But it'll help you, especially contouring videos. And you can watch, you can just look up contouring videos. And if you want something quick, you can watch contouring videos on Instagram Reels or TikTok or something where it's a short clip video service. It won't give you the in-depth description of things, but if you can pick up on it without that long description, that might be a way to kind of get some information without having to sit through a half-hour long contouring video, because there are some that are really long and really in-depth, which, if that's what you're looking for, is also great. On Sarah, I did add the red color to her lips, her mole on her chin, necklace, all of the highlights in her hair. Oh, her hair was so much fun to paint. Blonde coloring is another thing that I found very difficult to paint before. And it's just breaking it down and looking at the base colors that are there. I added some browns to it. I added some actually just white and a little bit more of a golden tone. I'm going to highlight her face, add a little bit more of a shadow under her nose. And then after all of that's done, I'm going to move on to Mary, the last of my Sanderson sister crew. Although, I mean, Winifred's sisters, it works too. Either way it works. I mistakenly painted her dress purple because I got confused about which of them was Sarah and which one was Mary when I was working on them, because at that first beginning stage, they looked so similar. And so we'll paint over that momentarily, but ignore the purple dress for the moment. We're going to add her purple hair though, with the exact same shade. Add the little curls along the sides. I absolutely love her face. Her facial features are just amazing. They're so quirky, and it's fun to watch. I'm going to be adding her dress with red, and then still using the color Braveheart as we have been all along. I'm going to be adding all of the shading on her face just to start with. The other thing that's great about this particular color, the color Braveheart, is that it blends out very nicely. Some colors, if they're really pigmented and a little bit thicker or tackier, You can't pat them out to blend them out nearly as well. This one, depending on how much paint you put on your brush, you can get varying gradations of depth to the color with one coat. So you can get fairly intense lines if you apply a nice, even, thick coat of the color. Thick is probably the wrong word, but normal coat of the color is a very rich, darker color. But if you use just a little bit and you kind of tap it on and brush it out, you can get very soft shading as well. I'm going to be adding in the same system, mixing a little bit of black into the Braveheart, darkening up areas, adding, the outlines of her eyes, going down and adding some more shading around her nose. The bottom of their noses is one of the places to really make sure that you add a little extra darkness to them, because the light is coming from above them. And so right underneath that nose, there's going to be a shadow. And right underneath the chin, there's going to be a shadow. And especially under the nose, it can seem a little bit, I don't know, like a mistake, almost like you're painting a mustache, to add that little shadow underneath the nose. But if you don't, it'll look like it's missing. So even if it seems like it is a bad idea, don't forget to do that. Add in her pupils, add some details with black gel paint right around the eyes. As with all of them, I did do some detailing with black gel paint that is not mixed with any shade of brown, but just straight black. Especially right around the eyes, it is super important to get that darkness and that intensity with black gel paint. I'm going to be adding her lips with red in their little crooked smile. Same shade of red I have been using all along. Make sure that you do leave a little bit of the teeth visible. And now you can add some details to her dress. So I'm using a second shade of red actually on her dress to add, because there's the different layers to it. It's not just one single shape. There's kind of a color that goes through. So add some darkness to really brighten up that area. It is not very visible in the video because the colors are very similar, but you do want to add just a little difference between the color of the dress and the bodice. That I'm going to take and mix some red into my purple. So I'm actually creating a more plum shade, and I'm going to be adding a little bit of black and using that to add some darkness to her hair and some shading in her hair and a little bit more details. Because I mixed in that black gel paint with the red and the purple, I have a bit more of a precise paint, so I can use that to create a little bit of wispies on the side of her hair. And then using a brighter shade of purple, I'm going to be using that to add some highlights to her hair. I actually mixed my purple with the pajama party that I used for their cheek color to get this brighter shade. And then the same thing as before, those final little white highlights to brighten up the faces a little bit, add a little bit more just highlight. I'm actually going to go through and do a little bit more spots of shading on her too. And then around the hair, you want to make sure that you add those nice bright white highlights around their hair. This will help distinguish them from the background as well as give them the backlit look. And then just like we did with Winifred, the little lacing on the front of her dress, and then apply matte top coat over all of the sisters and glossy top coat over the two nails on the sides. The two nails that are sisterless. If you wanted to write something else on those nails or paint something else, you could do something like you could write Hocus Pocus or Hocus Pocus 2, I Smell Children. There would be different things you could add to those. I just wanted to leave them plain because I loved the background so much. And then I'm going to take glossy top coat and apply it over the background that is visible behind the sisters, just using a small brush. And after that, they are all done. I love this set so much. So like I said earlier, portrait painting was something that was very daunting to me. So I just face it head on, and I've been doing more and more of it lately. But to have 3 portraits all lined up like this in one set is something that I am just really proud of. I hope you guys like it as much as I do. And don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well.